This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. But once the sacred months have passed, kill the polytheists who violated their treaties wherever you find them. Capture them, besiege them, and lie in wait for them on every way. But if you repent, perform prayers, and pay alms tax, then set them free indeed. Allah is all-forgiving, most merciful. Fight those who do not believe in Allah and the last day, nor comply with Allah and His Messenger have forbidden, nor embrace the religion of truth from among those who were given the scripture, until they pay the tax, willingly submitting, fully humbled. Allah has indeed purchased from the believers their lives and wealth in exchange for paradise. They fight in the cause of Allah and kill or are killed. This is a true promise binding on him in the Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran, and whose promise is truer than Allah's. So rejoice in the exchange you have made with him. That is truly the ultimate triumph. So guys, obviously, if you're listening to this show right now, or if you've been listening to this show for any length of time, you know I normally start out by reading scripture from the Holy Bible. That is obviously not from the Holy Bible. That is from the Quran, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that is here in just a second. But we got a couple of awesome announcements. So the first thing is we have launched a hoodie with origin. And if you see me looking around right now on YouTube, it's because I forgot to write down a note for my editor to show a beautiful picture of this hoodie. So I'm going to go ahead and have him put that up there. Shout out to Landon. Appreciate you. Look at this beautiful hoodie. We are finally, guys, y'all been telling us, make a hoodie with origin, do a hoodie with origin. So I got with my boy to do a design, and this is it, the King of Kings hoodie. But here's the thing. You guys are listening to this on Thursday the 8th, or no, Thursday the 9th. Okay, this is the 9th. You should have already gotten an email if you're signed up for our email list. If not, you go to our website and sign up for our email list. But guys, this pre-order ends at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time this Sunday, okay? So if you're listening to this on time, that is Sunday, January the 12th of 2025, okay? So this is the Black Kilo full zip hoodie. This thing is basically indestructible. If you're not familiar with Origins, because you haven't been listening to this show for very long, they've been a supporter of ours for a lot of years. I've been an influencer and a representative of them for years and years and years. Every stitch of this hoodie is made in America. Every stitch and fiber of this that's been put together has been put together with American hands by American citizens. It's a great, great thing. This is pre-order only, guys. So no exchanges, no returns, because we're not just, I told you guys before, running a shop is like, it sucks. I hate it. It's like the worst thing. It's not incredibly profitable and it takes a whole bunch of time. So we just do random drops here or there. This is one of those random drops. The reason why it's such a kind of a short time span is because they don't just keep a ton of these full zip hoodies in stock there at Origin. So I didn't want to run it for 2 or 3 weeks and then you order something and then they don't have it in stock and then I have to give you your money back and you're disappointed because you didn't get a hoodie, blah, 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 blah. The way that we get around that is that we take care of it this week. So guys, do not wait. If you like that hoodie, go ahead and check that out. Guys, there is a size chart on their website. You can link in the description. If you go to the link that's in our show notes here, or just go to our shop on our website, you can find the link. You go, you pick it out. Make sure you get the right size. Okay, make sure you get the right size. You can go to their little size chart. There's a size chart in there. I'm doing everything I can to hook you guys up. And to anyone that's going to pre-complain about the price, I'm literally selling it for the exact same amount that Origin is. Okay. So if you're thinking I'm just like jacking up the price so that I can like mess with you guys and all that, look, I don't try to make a bunch of money with our merch. I just make the merch because I know you guys want it. And so here you go. I've delivered Origin hoodie. Check it out. Go to the show notes for this episode or go to Undaunted.Life/shop. But we need to talk about the Daily Blade. So if you guys are listening to the podcast last Wednesday, okay, so this would have been 8 days ago, I announced that Joby Martin and I were launching the Daily Blade. So this is a short form devotional podcast that is targeted at men. And so we did that first episode where he and I just kind of talked through the concept and all of that. And then last week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, were the first batch of episodes. Those were recorded by Joby. And this week, we're in the middle of my first batch of episodes where I'm talking about the first 4 chapters of Nehemiah. And guys, you have blown our minds. You've absolutely blown our minds. So Wednesday, when we launched like the first episode, Joby's first episode, I made a comment that morning to my wife. I go, it'd be hilarious if within 48 hours, this show overtook anything that my show's ever done. Wouldn't that be so funny? And the funniest thing about me making that statement is it didn't take 48 hours. It took 4 hours because within a few hours, it was already in the top 10, I think, on the podcast charts on Apple and Spotify in our category, religion and spirituality. And it was already in the top 200 or top 100 on Apple and Spotify. But in the religion, and guys, this is mind blowing. In the religion and spirituality category, okay, on Apple, so far it has peaked at number 5 And on Spotify, it's peaked at number 4. Again, we're talking about within days of release, it's already peaking in these positions. But here's the crazy stuff. Out of all the podcasts in the United States, which is essentially all the podcasts, because most every podcast is an English language podcast played in America. So we're talking well over 6 million podcasts, okay? That's the last number that I saw, was well over 6 million podcasts in existence. On Apple, we were the number 65 podcast out of all the millions of podcasts in existence. And on Spotify, guys, get this. We were the number 25 podcast out of all the podcasts in the world. And by the time you guys listen to this, we may have fallen back a little bit, but we may even be higher. But I'm recording this a few days before it comes out. And guys, I'm just absolutely blown away. Like, it is incredibly and truly humbling that I currently have, because of you guys, 2 shows in the top 100 in the religion and spirituality category. This brand new one, which was just kind of an idea that Joby and I kicked around and said, all right, well, let's just follow through with it. And then this show, Undaunted.Life, a Man's Podcast. You guys are absolutely incredible. I'm just so thankful for you. But the thing with the Daily Blade, guys, it's a low barrier to entry. Because if you send somebody this episode, hey, check this out, well, you might end up being around an hour, a little bit less, a little bit more. That's a little bit more for a guy to, oh gosh, to check this guy's show out. I really got to make a contribution here. I really got to sacrifice some time. Not with the Daily Blade. We're talking 4 or 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes. So you can easily share an episode with a guy, and then if he likes it, he'll just go ahead and subscribe. And of course, in the future, we're going to have other pastors come on and different things to give us some different lessons. So it's an absolutely incredible thing. If you don't know what we're talking about, go to thedailyblade.com, thedailyblade.com, or just go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and search for it. And again, we can't pull off anything like the Daily Blade because, again, we said with the Daily Blade, we are never going to have sponsors. We're never going to ask you to buy something through there or something like that. The only reason we're able to pull that off is because we have donors, okay? And so if you guys want to see more content like Undaunted Life, like the Daily Blade, like the Forging Table, all of that, go to Undaunted.Life/donate, Undaunted.Life/donate. And obviously, if you're listening to this show or to the Daily Blade, please leave us a 5-star review. Oh, okay, so those are the announcements, right? So we've already gone several minutes in here, but now we need to talk about the quick hitters that we're going to hit on today's episode. We're going to talk about professional basketball being on life support, OnlyFans prostitute Lily Phillips having sex with 100 men in one day and announcing her next goal of having sex with 1,000 men in one day. The gay couple that systematically raped and pimped out their two adopted male children being sentenced to 100 years in prison. Sorta-President Joe Biden commuting the death sentences of almost all federal death row inmates. And Daniel Penny being found not guilty in the case involving the death of Jordan Neely. Now, one quick note I do want to make before I get into the main subject matter for today is we're not going to do a whole quick hitter on this one, but I did want to pay tribute to President Jimmy Carter, who passed away recently at the age of 100. He was our 39th president. Yes, if you go back and look at his administration, it was not a great time for America. Jimmy Carter had a lot to do with that. I don't know that I would have followed the Jimmy Carter lessons for leadership. There's obviously some disagreements as to whether or not the guy was even a Christian, or there's a lot of things out there and a lot of think pieces and all that. But there have only been a handful of guys, a few dozen guys that have been president of the greatest country ever known, the United States of America. And so I did want to pay tribute to President Jimmy Carter. But we need to go in the Wayback Machine all the way back to October of 2023. Seems like a million years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. Because early on the morning of October the 7th, 2023, Hamas systematically murdered well over 1,000 innocent Israelis for the crime of existing. So it was the largest mass killing of Jews since the Holocaust. Go back to episode 518 of the podcast. It's called Let Those Who Love the Lord Hate Evil. It's really one of the most important episodes that I've done. And I go into a lot of detail about the different atrocities that took place during that time in that place in history. And so, unfortunately, since that day, Islamic terrorist groups around the world have continued to murder. They've continued to rape. They've continued to destroy innocent human beings all over the globe simply because they are not Muslims and that they exist. But it's not really an over there problem, okay, in terms of America. It's a right here, right now problem as well. Because early the morning of New Year's Day, right, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a terrorist attack that took place on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. So a 42-year-old demon named Shamsud Din Jabbar, of course, an American citizen born in Saudi Arabia. He drove a rented Ford F-150 through the crowded streets of Bourbon Street there in New Orleans. He killed 14 people and injured many more. Jabbar was killed by police in an ensuing shootout. There were also IEDs that were discovered. These were supposedly placed by Jabbar in strategic places around New Orleans, but those were found and disposed of, thank God, before more people could be killed or injured. And we're being told that he did not have any accomplices, but I'm not sure anyone should believe that at this point. An ISIS flag was found in the vehicle, and apparently Jabbar pledged allegiance to ISIS just before carrying out this attack. People aren't sure when Jabbar, again, an American, was quote-unquote radicalized, but investigators are looking into a trip that he took to Egypt in 2023. So aside from going to see the pyramids, I'm not sure what else you're doing in Egypt. So they're still looking at that. There's still a whole lot about this story that we don't know yet. So I'm only really reporting what we already know. We also know that Jabbar had been to Bourbon Street on October and November of last year before carrying out the attack New Year's Day. And on both of those trips, he apparently walked around, and also during the attack, he walked around using the Meta glasses. So he was recording what he was seeing. So he was obviously casing the place out. He was trying to plan out his trip there in October and November before he actually carried out the attack in January. Now, the FBI unforgivably initially said that this was not a terrorist attack. It's like, what else exactly do you need to see for this to be a terrorist attack? Like, if he had scribbled on the side of the F-150, I am currently doing a terrorist attack, would you have also said it wasn't a terrorist attack? I mean, goodness, what else do you need to see? But now they've actually admitted that it was what we all knew from the beginning, which was a Islamic terrorist attack. And since the attack, the imam of the local mosque that Jabbar was attending in Houston directed the members to not speak to authorities. Okay, so if the authorities contacted any of the members of the mosque, that they were instead to refer all of their inquiries to the Council on American Islamic Relations. And that's a group with a pretty checkered past if you look into it. And just that one little point before I move on. Can you imagine this scenario? A Christian man going into a gathering of non-Christians with the express purpose of murdering those people because they are non-Christians, and then their church referring all the questions about the investigation to the Southern Baptist Convention or to the Acts 29 network or something like that. Literally no part of that scenario. That it being a Christian killing non-Christians for the sake of them being non-Christians and then them just referring them out to these big conglomerations. Literally none of that would seem plausible to you. So this seems like an isolated incident. And it would be very convenient if we could just treat it like, oh, this is just an isolated incident. It's a tragedy, but we'll heal and move on. However, there are people with some pretty good knowledge and insight into all these types of things that believe that this is going to be perhaps the first of many terrorist attacks in this country in a multitude of locations that will take place in 2025. So right after this attack took place, there were a bunch of clips from Sarah Adams's latest appearance on the Sean Ryan show. And this really, again, went viral after the attack. So Sarah Adams is a former CIA targeting analyst, so she really knows what she's talking about in terms of the fieldcraft of these different groups and kind of what they do and how they try to get in here. So here is one clip that should honestly send chills down your spine. Here it is.
If I remember correctly, Scott told me that Al-Qaeda is basically predicting that the casualty count will be between 50 and 60,000 Americans dead. Am I wrong on that?
So I don't know the count that they're predicting. What I do know is Al-Qaeda trained and sent 1,000 attackers.
1,000 attackers. When did they come through?
So they finished training and they deployed them. Now, depending on how they come through, it could take different times, right? So the fastest I've seen an Afghan leave Afghanistan and get over the border illegally is about 3 weeks. Now, if you get a tourist visa and a Saudi's passport, he can fly the day after he gets his visa, right? So it depends, because they are fine getting people in however they can get them in. And they actually prefer legal immigration, as you can imagine, because they want basically the attackers to sit here and wait. If they're legal, they're not going to raise any alarm bells.
So wait a minute. I just want to clarify. You are 100% certain that there are 1,000 plus Al-Qaeda trained fighters within the United States borders?
Well, Al-Qaeda says they trained and deployed 1,000 for this attack. First off, I think there's more than 1,000 Al-Qaeda members in the United States. But for the Homeland attack, that number is based on what Al-Qaeda is saying. So they could exaggerate it. However, they did have about 1,400 in the Hamas attack. So the number is not off from what they did in the first round of attacks.
So an absolutely bone-chilling clip there, absolutely bone-chilling. But in that interview, they also talk about these invisible suicide vests or S-vests and these sophisticated IEDs. So normally with suicide vests, they're incredibly big, incredibly bulky, a bunch of metal. You can't get through metal detectors. You can't really walk normal. And so it's kind of easy to identify. But they're talking about these very sophisticated suicide vests that can get through security. So think about the ramifications for a large stadium or arena. Think about concert halls. Think about airports. Because if you can conveniently wear an S-vest and just wear kind of like a big bulky sweatshirt or something like that over it and get into a place that has literally tens of thousands of people, think about the damage that can be done. And so these people are apparently here and already planning these attacks. And also we've known this for a long time, but there have been terrorist cells in this country for a very, very long time. Okay? A very, very long time. And a lot of them are just training and waiting for the day, whenever that day is, to attack and kill as many Americans as possible. So right about now, you might be wondering, so how can all these people be here in America? Like, aren't we a sovereign country? Like, don't we have the most powerful and expensive military on the planet? Don't we have the CIA and the FBI on the case? Are all of these terrorists, quote unquote, radicalized Americans? Well, a lot of this, you're going to get some Americans that are radicalized, but a lot of this is because of our wide open southern border. Now, again, this attack that took place in New Orleans, this was an American citizen. Okay, so this was a radicalized, quote unquote, radicalized American. But a lot of these individuals are coming from the Middle East, and they're coming to Central America or even South America, and they're making their way up, and they're just coming right across the border, and then they're going to meet up with the rest of their terrorist cell in this country. Again, in that clip, they're saying that there's at least 1,000 here that we basically know of. And the scariest thing is that there are people in the FBI and CIA that have basically confirmed that we know where a lot of these people are, and we're allowing them to live and operate here because, again, they're wanting to get the big dogs, right? And so they're going to let some little things pop off, and hopefully we don't have a big attack while on their watch. Now, before I get to my main commentary, I do need to do a quick public service announcement on this. And it's stuff that you've heard me say before. You heard me say it on the Try to Avoid Being a Crappy Man episode. No one is coming to save you. That's how you should operate. You are you and your family's first line of defense. That's how you should operate. And for the love of God, keep your head on a swivel. I mean, part of the thing with terrorism is they try to scare you into not doing anything. They try to scare you into just hiding in your home. Although I will just remind you, they went home to home, kibbutz to kibbutz, over in Israel, killing people and chopping their heads off and putting, babies, into microwaves and stuff like that. And so if you think you're safe in your home, you may have another thing coming. But I remember going to this gathering in the town that I live in for Christmas, and I'm just looking around because it's basically a party in the street kind of a thing. And I'm looking around and I'm like, somebody could do so much damage here. Like, it was incredibly hard for me to enjoy the experience because I was trying to keep, an eye on a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old that are kind of running around. But at the same time, I'm looking around looking for anybody that doesn't look like they should be there. Okay? But if you're going to hang out in these large crowds, you are going to run the risk of being, a statistic in one of these attacks. But one thing that you notice that happens after any attack like this that takes place anywhere in the world, you begin to see the same term thrown around, and that's radical Islam. Radical Islam, okay? This is true, by the way, all across the political aisle. So both left and right say this. You would expect it from the left, but even with the right, you just hear constantly people say radical Islam, or Islamic extremism, those types of things. So you have to ask yourself, what does this term mean? Well, to break it down, you look at the second word, which is Islam. So this is an Abrahamic monotheistic religion that is centered on the Prophet Muhammad and his teachings, which became the Quran. So it started about 600 years after Christ, and it's currently the world's second largest religion with just under 2 billion adherents. Okay, so that's Islam. But then when you put the word radical in front of it, it basically changes the meaning of the entire term, right? Because when you put radical in front of something, you're pointing to the fact that the thing being described, which in this case is Islam, is being presented in an incorrect way. Thus, it has been radicalized, right? So when you see something as radicalized, you're viewing it as an inappropriately over-the-top expression of a group or ideal or philosophy or something like that. But as I've said before, and as I will continue to scream from the rooftops, there is no such thing as radical Islam, scare quotes. There's no such thing as radical Islam when it comes to these terrorist murders and attacks. There's no such thing. What we see in these attacks is nothing more than fundamentalist Islam. Fundamentalist Islam. So we, all of us, okay, we need to delete the term radical Islam from our brains, from our collective vernaculars, and start using the more appropriate term of fundamentalist Islam. And this is why. Now, the Quran is a very jumbled book. If you read it, it's very confusing. It seemingly has no order. It's out of order, and it jumps around a lot, okay? But the Quran is broken up into 114 surahs or chapters, and devout Muslims believe that it should only be written, read, and spoken in Arabic. And so if you're reading, an English translation or a German translation or a Spanish translation of the Quran, true Muslims, devout Muslims think that's not actually the Quran, okay? Muslims also believe that the Quran was communicated by God directly to the Prophet Muhammad via the angel Gabriel over about 23 years. I think, Muhammad was like 40 years old, and then it went until he died, 23 years later. But there's a concept that we need to understand when it comes to the Quran, and that's abrogation. Okay? So basically what abrogation is and what that means is whatever I said most recently is what I actually meant. Okay? And so again, all the surahs are out of order. And so we have to look at, in the text, what is the least abrogated text? And when you start looking, you'll see the most abrogated text, so these would be the early texts of Muhammad, they're very peaceful. And they call for peace. These are the quotes that we'll get on the news when people look at these terrorist attacks and they're like, no, you got it all wrong. These are very nice, peaceful people. But the least abrogated surah is surah number 9. So that was the last surah, the last supposed revelation we get from the Prophet Muhammad via the angel Gabriel that came directly from God. Okay? Now, do you remember when I read at the very beginning of this podcast, I was reading from the Quran, but I didn't tell you what surah or what verses. I was reading Surah 9, and I read verses 5, 29, and 111. Okay? I'll read them again here, but before anyone suggests that I'm cherry-picking these verses and taking them out of context, I urge you to read the entirety of Surah 9 for yourself. You can just go Google it and find it, and see if you come to a different conclusion than I do in this episode. Okay? So here we go. Verse 5 of Surah 9. But once the sacred months have passed, kill the polytheists who violated their treaties wherever you find them. Capture them, besiege them, and lie in wait for them on every way. But if they repent, perform prayers, and pay alms tax, then set them free. Indeed, Allah is all forgiving, most merciful. So if you didn't catch that there, if you find these people, these horrible dogs, right, these non-Muslims, the only way that you are allowed to allow them to live, right, is if they repent, perform prayers, and pay a tax to you. Otherwise, you kill them because they're the infidel. Now let's go to verse 29. Fight those who do not believe in Allah and the last day, nor comply with what Allah and His Messenger have forbidden, nor embrace the religion of truth from among those who were given the scripture, until they pay the tax, willingly submitting, fully humbled. Then we have verse 111. Allah has indeed purchased from the believers their lives and wealth in exchange for paradise. They fight in the cause of Allah and kill or be killed. This is a true promise binding on him in the Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran, and whose promise is truer than Allah's. So rejoice in the exchange you have made with him. That is truly the ultimate triumph. So are the evil men and women that cut people's heads off, cook babies in ovens, systematically, vaginally, and anally rape men, women, and children, they burn people alive, throw people in cages and then lower those cages into water, throw gay people off buildings, fly planes into skyscrapers, blow themselves up in crowded places, and on and on and on. Are these people radicals? Are they extremists? Because according to the 9th surah of the Quran, the least abrogated, verses 5, 29, and 111, no, not at all. According to the most recent dictates and commands of their beloved prophet, they are fundamentalists. Actually, they are the only true Muslims. So when someone's like, look, I'm not down for that. I'm not down for, Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Boko Haram and all that. I'm not down with all of them, right? I'm just a peaceful Muslim. That's basically a non-practicing Muslim. It's akin to if a Christian says, or if someone that claims to be Christian is like, yeah, I'm Christian, but yeah, if you want to be gay, that's fine. If you want to kill babies via abortion, that's also fine. Yeah, the Bible, it's just, suggestions, but it's not really God's word. Okay, you can say all those things, especially if you live in a free country like the United States. You're just not a Christian. So you're claiming allegiance to a group that the people, the adherents to the words of that group would say, well, no, actually you're not. So if you are a peaceful Muslim, you are not following the dictates of Muhammad. Now, if we go back as I wrap up here on episode 518, I started out episode 518. This was after the Hamas attacks in Israel. I started out by reading Psalm 97:10. Let those who love the Lord hate evil, for he guards the lives of his faithful ones and delivers them from the hand of the wicked. The message of today's show is not to look at every Muslim that you know in your world, kind of like, ooh, I don't know, is this person about to blow up the office? Is this person, oh, you see a Muslim in an airport and you're like, oh my gosh. Like, we should always be vigilant about people that don't look like they're in their right mind or people that look like they're a little bit out of place. The point is we need to be real. We need to be real and we need to stand up for truth. Again, go back to my how to avoid being a crappy man in 2025 episode. I said we need more black and white thinking. Okay, and I obviously didn't mean that racially. I said we deal too much in gradations and in nuance, and we're just going to nuance this issue. Oh, it's a very complicated nuance issue. No, there's black and white. Islam is either true or it's not. Christianity is either the way or it's not. Salvation comes through Jesus by grace, through faith alone, or it doesn't. You don't need to die the death of 1,000 qualifications before standing up for truth. One of the ways we can stand up for truth is by taking our language and the words that we use very, very seriously. So enough with this nonsense about radical Islam. What we're seeing with all this bloodshed is fundamentalist in Islam. That's what we're seeing. So don't allow people to compel you to say something different. It's fundamentalist Islam. Hey guys, real quick. A consistent question that I am asked is, Kyle, what is your diet? People want to know if I'm tracking macros or if I'm doing keto or something like that, but I track one thing. I try to get 1 gram of high quality protein for every pound of body weight. And so for me, I eat red meat every single day. Pretty much for lunch, I eat a pound of red meat every single day to get over 100 grams of high quality protein. And guys, I want you to be able to get the same thing for you and your diet. That's why I want you to use the official beef delivery partner of Undaunted.Life, and that's Primal Beef. Primal Beef is a cattle operation owned and operated by Sean Glass. He's a retired Navy SEAL that partnered with Jocko Willink, yes, that Jocko Willink, to launch Primal Beef. So what makes Primal Beef different from the other beef delivery companies? It's a combo of the following. It's all American Black Angus cattle. The beef comes from one farm, and that's in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. The beef is all natural, no hormones ever, no antibiotics ever, no mRNA ever. After slaughter, the entire carcass is dry aged and then hand cut by artisan butchers and then flash frozen to ensure that it maintains tenderness, marbling, and flavor. And here's another cool thing. For every box sold, Primal Beef donates meat directly to a member of America's Special Operations Forces through the C4 Foundation. So you can take pride in knowing that your purchase will help put literal food on the table for America's finest warriors. Are you salivating yet? If not, it's probably because you're a vegan. Stave off veganism and try Primal Beef out today by going to www.primalbeef.com. That's primalbeef.com. Use the promo code Kyle to get $25 off of your first order. Again, that's primalbeef.com, promo code Kyle to get $25 off your first order. All right, let's move on to the quick hitters. Professional basketball being on life support. Okay, so let's talk about my fandom as it pertains to the NBA, the National Basketball Association. So as a kid, that was when the Bulls were kind of in their second three-peat, that type of era. So I was there for Michael Jordan, going into baseball, but then I was really there for that second. And so I just thought, everybody was a Bulls fan, and so that's how I followed the NBA. But it was kind of hard as a kid to watch the NBA like throughout the season, but I would really, really watch the playoffs. I really enjoyed the month of June because you get to watch the playoffs. And then I forget if I was in high school or college, we get the Oklahoma City Thunder, maybe been after college for all I know, can't remember. But we're going to Thunder games, and it's in Oklahoma City. Well, and at first it was the Hornets because they were displaced because of the hurricane. And then, we actually got our own team when we stole the Seattle Supersonics and all those types of things, which, by the way, Seattle is like a top 5 or top 6 city for people that listen to the show. That is shocking. So sorry that I just, threw some shots at you guys, but thanks so much for your NBA team. We're really enjoying them. But then everything changed for me during 2020, during the COVID years, the COVID shutdowns. So obviously St. George Floyd overdosed while in police custody, but everybody on the planet thinks that he was murdered. And during that time, everybody wanted to virtue signal, and the NBA were probably the biggest of all virtue signalers. They put this Marxist slogan of this company, Black Lives Matter, right there on the court in their bubble. So when LeBron James won the Lakers thing, he won basically the AAU championship, because they did this like bubble tournament thing. So he didn't have anybody chirping at him and all that. And so it just says Black Lives Matter right there on the court. You had, guys wearing like I Can't Breathe shirts, and like everything had basically circled around this narrative that white people are racist. And if they don't think they're racist, they mean that they're actually super mega racist and that cops are the worst and all these types of things. And in that moment, I was like, you know what? F you guys. Like, you guys are ridiculous. Like, you're literally lecturing to me while I'm supporting you with my eyeballs. So now I'm going to not support you with my eyeballs anymore. So basically since 2020, I have not fervently followed the NBA. I have not sat down and watched an entire game from beginning to end. But I do still kind of understand what's happening, because as you're scrolling X or as you're watching sports or listening to sports radio or something like that, you're still getting guys' names. You kind of know who's winning championships, who's winning MVPs, like that kind of stuff. But I'm not following the sport very closely. Now, there have been two big reports out recently about the two biggest pro basketball leagues in men's and women's basketball in America, which is obviously the NBA and the WNBA. One report came out saying that the NBA ratings have absolutely tanked in recent years. So year over year, they've been tanking, and that ratings are down something like 50% over the last decade. And this is at the same time that we have skyrocketing player salaries, which obviously spells bad news for the future health of the league. And then in the WNBA, they had a colossally successful year in terms of attention, almost all of which because of how amazing Caitlin Clark is, only to still lose an astonishing amount of money as a league. They just couldn't be successful, even though they were actually having sellouts anywhere where Caitlin Clark's claim, I don't know who she plays for, but anywhere she went, they would sell out. So essentially, no one wants to watch the NBA anymore, and no one has ever wanted to watch the WNBA until Caitlin Clark entered the league, but they're blowing it, right? So you kind of have to ask, like, what gives? Like, what's the big deal? So a lot of people are saying that, pro basketball in America is dead and the NBA is dead. But, that's a little bit hyperbolic. It's not dead, but it is certainly on life support. And here's the reasons why. So WNBA is kind of easier to get to, so I'll go through this quickly. So the first thing is, and the first reason why the WNBA has never been successful is because it's female athletes playing an explosive sport. And for the most part, females are not explosive athletes. That's not me saying that women are terrible and that they should just be in the kitchen, wearing a bonnet and making me a pie. Like, that would be wonderful. I like cherry pie, by the way. But like, at the same time, that's not what anyone's saying. It's just, it's one of the most explosive games because it has to do with quick movements, a lot of jumping, the dunking, all those types of things. And that's just something that female athletes can't do anywhere near what male athletes can do. And so, of course, more people are not going to want to watch that version. They're not going to want to watch a less athletic version of an athletic endeavor. Okay. Also, the WNBA has never once had a genre, cross-cultural hero or character until now. Like, the generalized public wasn't talking about what Cheryl Swoops was doing or Lisa Leslie or Diana Taurasi or any of these other stars. We may have known their names because colloquially we pay attention to sports, but there's been no one that's kind of captured our attention or imagination until Caitlin Clark, and they're kind of blowing it now. Which goes into the next thing, which is the league is trying to cash in off of female Michael Jordan, Caitlin Clark, already one of the best female basketball players ever, and she just had her first professional league of her career, while at the same time trying to destroy her. The fouls that were committed to her, against her during the year have been insane. The trash talk that we've gotten towards her, people trying to ignore her entirely, trying to leave her out of things, just this pettiness that we see. They're trying to destroy their cash cow, which is ridiculous. And the last one that I'll put out here is the last people that were actually hanging on because they liked Caitlin Clark. They didn't think she was going to say a bunch of dumb things out loud. They just liked watching her play. They now have no reason to defend her because of what she said in a Time Magazine article. So she was named by Time Magazine as the Athlete of the Year for 2024. And I think there's, good reason to say that. I mean, there are some other people that you could mention, but, obviously a lot of things kind of revolved around her. So good for her. But this would have been a time for the WNBA to celebrate her, right? No, there was people crying, saying that it was racist, that they just put a white woman on the cover. And why didn't they put the entire league on the cover, as if that makes any sense at all when you're naming the athlete singular of the year? But then you had the interview that Caitlin Clark did in her Time Magazine article. And so here you go. Caitlin Clark has basically been clean this whole time. She is not kowtowed. She is not bowed to the woke mob. She just went out there. She keeps getting poked in the eye. She keeps getting knocked down. She just keeps smoking all the women in this league. But here's what she said in the article. I want to say that I've earned every single thing, but as a white person, there is privilege. A lot of those players in the league that have been really good have been black players. This league has kind of been built on them. The more we can appreciate that, highlight that, talk about that, and then continue to have brands and companies invest in those players that have made this league incredible, I think it's very important. I have to continue to try to change that. The more we can elevate black women, it's going to be a beautiful thing. What an unbelievable self-own by Caitlin Clark. Like, my goodness, the pressure finally got to her. Because the implication here is that because an athlete is black, we as a society refuse to elevate them, which is hilarious. The most famous athlete that's ever lived is Michael Jordan. Last I checked, super duper black. The most famous athletes on planet Earth right now, if you looked at the list of the top 25 most famous athletes, certainly in America, they're almost all black. Almost all of them. Okay? When you watch the NFL, and if you love the secondary in the NFL, how many of those guys are not black? And we love elevating people that are excellent at what they do, because in general, the average everyday sports fan could give a crap less what you look like while you're doing the thing. They just want to see you do the thing. You know why so many people are obsessed with watching Nikola Jokic play basketball? It's because he's really good at basketball. The dude looks like a complete doof. He looks like one of those rectangular erasers with like arms and legs coming out of it. He's like one of the least athletic looking people ever. I was just thinking about this yesterday. Daniel Cormier. If you want to know a lot about whether or not people know anything about fighting, you need to show them a picture of prime Mike Tyson and a picture of prime Daniel Cormier and ask them who would win in a fight. And if they're a moron, they're going to say Mike Tyson. And if they know a thing or two, they're going to be like, Daniel Cormier 1 million times out of a million, which is the correct answer, right? Mike Tyson, Daniel Cormier, both black. Both celebrated athletes here in America. So the implication that we don't celebrate athletes that are black is absolutely and completely false. So as opposed to celebrating greatness as a league, and as opposed to just, Clark humble bragging, if you're her, it's a conversation about white privilege. It's like, good grief, how stupid can you be? So that's the WNBA shooting themselves in the foot. But now let's talk about the NBA. So there's too many to name, so I didn't bother numbering them. So the first thing is the product itself. So this was, I think, last year. Yeah, I was in Houston, and I was just sitting. I went to this restaurant early, so nobody was there. It was early or late, I can't remember. And so I'm eating dinner by myself at the bar, and they had an NBA game on. And so I can't even remember who was playing. And I just remember watching this being like, what is this? Like, because again, I hadn't watched the NBA in a few years because of all the COVID stuff, George Floyd stuff. And so I was like, what is this game? It's dribble, drive, kick out, three-pointer. Dribble, drive, kick out, three-pointer, or dribble, drive, try to lay it up, get a foul call if you're an all-star, don't get a foul call if you're not an all-star. And that's the entire game. Barely any defense. Like games when I was growing up, you would have a game that would end 88-91, and now you have teams, playing it to like 147 to 142. It's like, it's just that's what the game is. And that's every single team. They're all playing the same type of thing. They've all made the same type of player. You have the Golden State Warriors that just started shooting threes and like hitting threes, and they got big guys shooting threes. And so now we got the biggest guys in the league, Wemby, Jokic, we have Embiid, we have all these guys shooting threes. And it's just boring. The product is boring. That's a reason why the NBA is failing. Also, what are the rivalries right now in the NBA? Do we have anything close to the Celtics, Lakers from back in the day? Because all these players seem to like each other. They're hanging out, they're dabbing each other up, they're working out in the offseason, there's no real rivalry. So it's like, why should I care if you seemingly don't care? Also, we see load management in teams that are playing softly for large stretches of games. So load management, you have, some of these superstars that are, no, they're not playing tonight. Why? Load management. I just remember thinking back to those old baseball players. I think it was like, I forget who it was, Joe DiMaggio or Stan Musial or something like that. They would say, why do you play so many games? And they're just like, well, look, there might be a kid who comes from a poor family and their family moved heaven and earth to get their kid to a game today, and he wanted to see me because I'm his favorite player. And what if I just took the day off because I was tired, right? And, the league basically proved that these players didn't really care during the season and that they were just kind of like, slacking off because they like invented this like in-season tournament thing where they like They're like, well, the product sucks, so what do? Let's just make the court like neon green and let's pretend like the players actually care because no one's putting up, a trophy from the in-season tournament being like, yeah, we won the championship. Also, most of America doesn't like the biggest star in the NBA, and that's LeBron James. LeBron James went from being one of the most beloved athletes in America to being one of the most divisive athletes in America. It started with him taking his talents to South Beach. A lot of people didn't really like that. They didn't really like a lot of the things that he said. Obviously, he is ignorantly, put his stamp on any stupid left-wing thing that we've seen happen, including the George Floyd stuff. And so when the biggest star of your sport is so unlikable, that's not a good thing. Also, speaking of LeBron, the league has no plan for after LeBron, Steph, and KD retire. They're all getting old. Okay, so we have no idea when they're going to retire because they're juicing those guys up with all kinds of stuff, but we have no idea when those guys are going to retire, but there's no heir apparent. There's no logical next man up because all of the American-born best players are as boring as watching grass grow. So you got Jason Tatum, you got Jalen Brunson, you got Anthony Davis, who's always hurt anyway, you have Tyrese Halliburton, and on and on and on. They just don't capture the imagination of the generalized public. I would say the closest person is probably Anthony Edwards. When I see Anthony Edwards highlights or things like that, that dude's a dog. I really like watching that guy play. Again, I don't watch the NBA, but whenever I see his highlights, I'm like, that's incredible. But he plays in Minnesota. And so unless they win a bunch of championships up there, no one's really going to pay attention to him. Another reason the NBA is failing is because all of their best young players are not Americans. I know basketball is an international sport, but in terms of the business of basketball, it's an American sport. And here are the best players in the league. Jokic from Serbia, Luka from Slovenia, SGA's from Canada, Embiid's from Cameroon, Giannis is from Greece, Wemby's from France. Okay? And here's another thing that all those guys have in common. They're all boring. And they don't want to be the face of the league. Okay? Luka might be the exception, but who's going up to their buddy on the streets like, hey, you going to get those new Jokic's? You going to get those Jokic 4s? Like, no one's doing that. These are boring players that don't want to be the face of the league. Another reason that the NBA is sucking it up is almost every team makes the postseason. So why am I supposed to get excited about a game in January? There's I think 10 of the teams don't make the postseason. So it's like everybody makes it, like everybody gets a trophy pretty much, so why are we paying attention to this? But also, hyper left-wing woke coaches like Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr, the league allows them to do political and cultural rants while on the clock. So they're doing post-game or pre-game press conferences, and they're talking about Donald Trump. They're talking about the election. They're talking about systemic white privilege, okay? And they're lecturing to people that, they're answering the question of, hey, what did you think about the defensive shifts that the team made in the second quarter to try to shut down your best scorer? And they're like, well, that Donald Trump, he's fascist. Okay, is that why we're here? And then another thing that I'll just throw in there is forcing female commentators down the audience's throat. I will tell you this, for most guys, you can say it's wrong, whatever you want to say. When we're watching sports, for a lot of guys, if they hear the voice of a female commentator, they don't want to hear that, okay? You might be able to look into that and look at the brain science and why does that happen. But if you've watched sports your entire life and you hear these male voices kind of carrying you along through the game, and then all of a sudden you hear Doris Burke trying to explain to you what just happened in the paint, okay, it just doesn't really land with everybody. But let's go to my big takeaway on this one because I spent a lot of time kind of laying all that out. If you infuse left-wing cultural wars and culture war stuff into your sport, you will lose. And you deserve to, regardless of how good your product is. And in the case of the NBA and the WNBA, the product stinks. Because you have the WNBA, obviously they love to create culture war things. They've got this amazing young lady that came into the league that just so happens to be white. And so now they've racialized everything. And anyone that says something good about her, it's like they're saying something bad about black people inherently, which is not how any of this works. And then you've got the NBA, again, that ever since 2020 and COVID, and really quite a bit before then, they're trying to bring politics into the game, as opposed to understanding what sports is, which is an escape. That's what we want from sports. We want it to be an escape from what we're experiencing. We want it to be an escape from our job, an escape from, a relationship falling apart, or from a business falling apart, or just because we want to sit there and veg out for a little bit. But in this case, they're doing everything they can to destroy the product. If they keep going the way that they are, that's exactly what they're going to do. All right, next quick hitter here. OnlyFans prostitute named Lily Phillips having sex with 100 men in one day and announcing her next goal of having sex with 1,000 men in one day. Very depressing story. So quick warning on this story. I'm not going to be linking or posting any links to any of the news articles or any of the videos because I don't want this to be a temptation for any of you guys, because with any of these sites, I mean, I was on mainstream sites and they're showing very revealing pictures of this woman. And I don't want this to be a source of temptation, because you are going to be one click away from hardcore porn if you look at any of these stories. It's important for me talking about this. So again, be strong, no porn, no jerking off. Again, don't do any of that. So that's the quick warning on this. So for any of you that are not aware, OnlyFans, as far as I understand it, is a website. It's a porn website that people can subscribe to. And the people that are on there, I guess some of them are what you would call professional porn stars, so they're professional prostitutes. But then if you're just, Jane or John Doe down the street and you want to start an OnlyFans page or something like that, you can just do that. You can hook up your own camera, you can hook up your phone, you can do whatever, and you can do sex acts for money, which is exactly what prostitution is. So the overwhelming majority of people make no money while defiling themselves and lowering themselves, but some people do make a considerable amount of money doing that. So this is according to People magazine on December the 13th of last year. Lily Phillips is sparking a debate online after sleeping with 100 men in a single day. In the Josh Peters documentary titled I Slept with 100 Men in One Day, the OnlyFans model recalls sleeping with multiple men one day in October to create NSFW, not safe for work, content for her subscription-based social media page. OnlyFans star Lily Phillips has gone viral for sleeping with 100 men in one day. In one clip that has gone viral, the model can be seen breaking down in tears as she says she felt somewhat robotic sleeping with that many people in one day. You think? I think by the 30th, when we're getting on a bit, I've gotten a routine of how we're going to do this, and sometimes you disassociate, and it's like not normal sex at all, Phillips said. In my head right now, I can think of like 5 or 6 guys, 10 guys that I remember, and that's it. But it's just weird, isn't it? If I didn't have the videos, I wouldn't have known I've done 100. And then we have, according to Us Weekly on December the 12th of last year, OnlyFans influencer Lily Phillips says her most recent male encounters were only the lead up to her main event. I want to be the first person to be with 1,000 guys in one day, Phillips told the Daily Mail in an interview earlier this month. She told the publication that she plans to meet the goal by the end of January 2025. And no, the influencer is not daunted by the task. I'm quite excited, she added. Obviously, it's stressful with all the logistics and things, but it's not daunting. Phillips first revealed her wish in a TikTok video posted last month. The entire ordeal is set to be filmed in her OnlyFans for her OnlyFans subscribers. You might know me as a girl who's been with 101 guys in a day, Phillips said in a clip from November the 5th. Now I'm currently in training to do 1,000 guys in a day. Okay? So I don't know if she's going to do that. I frankly don't really care. This is an incredibly sad story, but it's also like I'm sad for her, but I'm disgusted by her, right? This filthy. This is a 23-year-old young lady, and that she's doing this for money. And she's not, unfortunately, she's not really rare. So according to Hannah Pearl Davis on her podcast, she was breaking down some numbers. There are apparently 1.4 million American women that are currently prostituting themselves on OnlyFans. Okay? 1.2 million of those 1.4 million American women are Gen Z. Okay? That means they're between the ages of 18 and 24. Now, how many women in America are between 18 and 24? That's 10 million women. Yep. For those of you that are good at math, you already figured this one out. About 10% of women in America ages 18 to 24 are currently whoring themselves out online for masturbatory aid materials for men. About 10% of 18 to 24-year-old women in America. Think about that. And then Pearl Davis talks about the consumers of OnlyFans. Okay, the consumers of OnlyFans. There are 82 million American men subscribed to OnlyFans. 82 million American men. There are 165 million men in the U.S., so about half of the American population, the male American population, are subscribed to a porn website. 90% of those men are married. Think the church doesn't have some work to do? So let's go to my big takeaways here. I got a lot. First thing, Lily Phillips and whores like her will continue to defile and destroy themselves as long as there is a market. And so a lot of you guys will lament, the pornography and the whole industry and how there's human trafficking that's part of it, and abuse and murder. There's all these things that are tied up into the porn industry. And then you will jack off while watching porn. And you think there's no victim here. Well, the victim is caused by the market drive for the product. And so if you continue to pump money into an industry, there will continue to be people like Lily Phillips that will take advantage of that. And also, this is my next big takeaway, the people around Lily Phillips are awful, evil people, the most awful of which is probably her mother. Her mother is the money person for Lily Phillips. Her mother handles the money. And if I remember correctly, because there were a lot of the, bleeped out and blurred out clips, traveling around online as I was looking for the story, her mom comes in to hand her some napkins and some stuff in between banging these random dudes, right? Telling her, hey, good luck. You're doing a great job. Her mother. Good grief. But my next takeaway here is, when did we all become so comfortable with prostitution? I must have missed the memo. I must have missed where it's hey, yeah, prostitution is kind of the seedy thing. We shouldn't hope for it. We shouldn't push anyone to it. Now it's just a thing. It's we get this article about some random woman on OnlyFans making $40 million in a year. And we're just hey, capitalism, right? It's when did we societally become okay with this? And my last takeaway here, and this is very, very important, guys. So really, really tune in on this one. If you don't teach your children about biblical sexual ethics, then the sex-crazed, porn-crazed world will do it for you. Because this is normal. I listened to a podcast recently about how normal sports betting is and how they're gamifying it and they're trying to get little kids hooked on it, especially little boys, competitive little boys, because by the time they get to college, they are caught, and they are super caught. And they're not betting, on the Lions, in the over. They're betting on, who's going to, I don't know, the over-under on yards on the second punt return. They're betting little things here and there, okay? But the same is true about pornography. We've normalized pornography to such a degree that when people decide to take their own phone or their own camera and become a porn actor or actress, right? A porn performer, that we're yeah, makes sense. Hope they make a good deal of money. And so, guys, you are going to have to give an account someday for how you've shepherded your flock, which is your family, for how you've loved your wife as Christ loved the church, and for how you've catechized your children. So if you're not teaching them the biblical sexual ethics and standards, regardless of how you lived your life, that is a you problem. So don't come crying to me when your kids don't believe in the Bible and don't believe in the ethics that come from the Bible, and they just buy into whatever the world's selling to them. All right, next one here, and I got to tell you, when I was going back over the story, just the level of anger, it's just insane. But the gay couple that systematically raped and pimped out their 2 adopted male children being sentenced to 100 years in prison. So this is according to the New York Post last December the 23rd. A gay Georgia couple convicted of sickening sexually abuse. Yeah, that's a typo. Sickening sexual abuse of their 2 adopted sons will spend the rest of their lives in prison. William and Zachary Zulick, 34 and 36, were each sentenced last week to 100 years in prison without the possibility of parole, the Walden County District Attorney's Office announced. So, guys, if you want to go back to episode 426 of this podcast, I did a super, super deep dive on this. I highly, highly suggest you go back and listen to that, episode 426. But I'll give you the highlights of the case. So the Zulicks adopted an 8-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy. These were brothers from a supposedly Christian special needs adoption agency. The reason why I say supposedly Christian is because what in the actual F? You allow these LGBTQ activists, which is what these guys were, right, to be adopted, and you say you're a Christian organization? I want you to remember this story when people, sometimes Christians, try to guilt you into saying that you should be okay with gays adopting children, okay? Because these guys, LGBTQ activists, they would take these boys, these brothers, to a bunch of pride parades, and they would show them off like they were an accessory, like they were a new handbag or something. And that would have been bad enough, but apparently they tired of just showing them off, so they decided to start raping them and pimping them out to their pedophilic gay buddies. So these 2 gay demons made homemade gay child porn with these boys and distributed it online. I'm assuming they profited off of that. They sodomized these boys repeatedly. They forced the boys to give them oral sex. They performed oral sex on the boys. And then they pimped the boys out to other men that were part of this kind of gay pedophilic rape group in Georgia. I mean, what do you even say? What do you even say? So big takeaway here. I saw a lot of people talk about how justice has been served in this case. Really? Justice? These 2 demons get to live for the next several decades with 3 hots and a cot provided by the U.S. taxpayer, and you think that's justice? That justice was done for these 2 boys that have been absolutely physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually destroyed by these people? No. Justice would be if we executed them publicly. Justice would be if we cut their balls off and let them bleed out slowly. And, even as I'm saying all that, prisons aren't exactly fun places for child rapists, so who knows? They might get justice after all, but that leads me to my next takeaway. Why do we have to hope, in some cases, for prison justice to be meted out when we have a functioning, albeit jacked up, court system here in the United States? How is it possible that we are not serious about dealing death to people like this? Make the affirmative case. Make the affirmative case for why these 2 men should still be alive. After what they have done, right? After they made choices and did these evil things. What is the affirmative case? You don't have one. It's actually somewhat tangentially tied to this next story, so let's get to the next quick hitter. Sorta-President Joe Biden commuting the death sentences of almost all federal death row inmates. So this is according to the AP on December the 23rd of last year. President Joe Biden on Monday announced that he is commuting the sentences of 37 of the 40 people on federal death row, converting their punishments to life imprisonment just weeks before President-elect Donald Trump, an outspoken proponent of expanding capital punishment, takes office. The move spares the lives of people convicted in killings, including the slayings of police and military officers, people on federal land, and those involved in deadly bank robberies or drug deals, as well as the killings of guards or prisoners in federal facilities. The decision leaves 3 federal inmates to face execution. They are Dylan Roof, who carried out the 2015 racist slayings of 9 black members of Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, 2013 Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, and Robert Bowers, who fatally shot 11 congregants at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history. I've dedicated my career to reducing violent crime and ensuring a fair and effective justice system, Biden said in a statement. Today, I am commuting the sentences of 37 of the 40 federal individuals on death row to life sentences without the possibility of parole. These commutations are consistent with the moratorium my administration has imposed on federal executions in cases other than for terrorism and hate-motivated mass murder. Quick side note that wasn't here in my notes. What mass murder is not hate-motivated? You dolt, you simpleton. Good grief. So let's actually go through some of the cases for the people that he just gave life in prison. So Thomas Sanders, he was convicted in 2014 of kidnapping and murdering a 12-year-old girl. Sanders kidnapped the little girl after he shot her mother in the head in front of her, and Sanders held the little girl captive for several days and then shot her, slit her throat, and then hid her body in the woods. Then we've got Daryl Lawrence, who murdered a 33-year-old Ohio police officer during a bank robbery in Columbus in 2005. Then we have James Rowan Jr. He's a gang member that committed 11 drug-related murders in 1992. You have Aquilia Barnett, killed a man while carjacking him and then driving to another state to kill his ex-girlfriend in 1996. We have Brandon Basham, who escaped from prison and kidnapped, raped, and killed 2 women in West Virginia. We have Jorge Torres, who raped and murdered an 8-year-old girl and a 9-year-old girl in 2005 and later strangled a naval officer in Arlington. Edward Fields Jr., he killed 2 campers in Oklahoma in 2003. You have Jurugis Kadaumovas, kidnapped and killed 5 Russian and Georgian immigrants as part of a kidnap for ransom plot in 2001 and 2002. Then we got Lynn Davis, a New Orleans police officer that ordered the killing of a woman in order to cover up a misconduct case that was coming against him in 1994. And then there's a bunch of dudes that killed multiple people. There's a bunch of dudes that murdered fellow inmates while in prison. So to recap, Biden is completely okay with allowing vile, murdering psychopaths to live, and he pardoned his son Hunter of any and all crimes over a 10-year period to cover his own tushy. That's currently the world we're living in. That's why elections matter, people. So let's go to my big takeaways on this one. A country is only serious about justice if punishment is administered quickly. Okay? So Ecclesiastes 8:11. This is a very, very important verse. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is fully set to do evil. Which is true. Because people, the death penalty is not even a deterrent. Well, you can make it a deterrent. As I've said before, if you are convicted of murder or of rape or any type of pedophilia, I think you should be executed in this country. So if you're convicted, you get 1 appeal. If you lose your appeal, the next day at dawn, you die. And I think you should be executed publicly. Who says no? What is the case against it? Make the case against it. Because when you convict somebody and then they do all these different appeals and then, they get a new trial and then they get these things and then they're allowed to live for 20, 30, 40 years on death row, what is the justice exactly? And for any of you people that are like, well, don't you want these people to live as long as possible so that they can see Christ? Well, guess what? If you're a Calvinist, you don't even believe in that because they're either elect or they're not. They were either destined before time to accept Christ or not. Okay? So the timeline is the timeline. Next quick hitter here is it's completely unfair to us, the U.S. taxpayer, to keep these monsters alive for decades. Because again, you as a justice system, as a country, you're not making the affirmative case as to why I should want that person to be alive. They are sentenced to death. Carry out the sentence. Because if you sentence somebody to 20 years in prison, there's no way to speed that up. Time just has to go by. But you are not sentencing them to something that is time-bound. You're sentencing them to something that is execution-bound by the execution of the act, which in this case is execution. Why should I have to pay for you to live? I don't get it. My last big takeaway on this is if Joe Biden, because not a lot of people are talking about this, if Joe Biden were intellectually honest and consistent, which I know would be hilarious, of course he's not, but if he were, he would have also commuted the sentences of Dylan Roof, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, and Robert Bowers as well. Because according to his worldview, if the death penalty is wrong and too heavy-handed and we should have a moratorium against it, then it should be wrong and too heavy-handed regardless of the circumstances. Because what were the extenuating circumstances in these cases? So Robert Bowers, what did he killed 11 people or something like that? Well, there are people in that list that killed around that number of people. What is the difference? Oh, well, because it was a hate-related crime because he killed Jews. There's not a separate category for hate. I know in the American justice system there apparently is, but define hate crime for me. Does anyone intentionally murder somebody and not hate them at the same time? So we're just not a serious country when it comes to this, and we currently don't have an intellectually honest leader, and I can't wait for him to get out of office. All right, the last quick hitter here, Daniel Penny being found not guilty in the case involving the death of Jordan Neely. So this is according to NBC News on December the 9th of 2024. Daniel Penny was acquitted Monday of criminally negligent homicide in the chokehold death of Jordan Neely, a 30-year-old homeless man with a history of mental illness whose final moments on a New York City subway train were captured by bystander video that set off weeks of protests and drew national attention. The decision on the fifth day of deliberations came after the jury deadlocked Friday on the more serious charge of manslaughter, leading the judge to dismiss it. Penny faced up to 4 years in prison. As the jury foreperson read the not guilty verdict, some observers in the courtroom applauded. Others began to audibly sob and yell, including Neely's father, Andre Zachary, who was escorted out. "This is America. This is the sound of black pain," one person said outside the courtroom in Lower Manhattan to the reaction. Chants of no justice, no peace could be heard echoing from outside. So obviously there were a lot of people that were nervous about this case. We were nervous for Daniel Penny. We were nervous for him, Daniel Penny, because we saw this as completely justified. Because to remind you of what Jordan Neely was doing, because again, some of the news people were like, oh, this was just a Michael Jackson impersonator that was murdered by this mean, angry white man. When it was like, no, he wasn't like moonwalking and bothering people. He was threatening people. He was saying that he was willing to kill people, willing to go back to prison where he should have been this entire time, right? Because he was just a career criminal. And so in that particular case, it's like, wait a minute. This guy was protecting the people of that train, and all the people on that train came to Daniel Penny's defense because they were there. You weren't. CNN reporter, NBC reporter, New York Times reporter, you weren't there. But the people that were in there that were terrified for their life or their safety were thrilled that Daniel Penny was there. Thrilled. So let's get right to my big takeaways on this one. First thing, just as a side note, more people need to start doing jiu-jitsu because apparently no one knows what a chokehold is. Because everyone's describing this as a chokehold. I'm pretty sure that they were in this position on the floor of the train car, the subway car, for minutes after minutes. Okay? And then if we go back to what happened in the George Floyd case, people are like, oh my gosh, he choked him out. Again, if I brought you to my house and I laid you on your stomach and I put my shin across the exact place where that officer had it on George Floyd's neck, you will never lose consciousness because I've cut off the oxygen to your brain or your blood to your brain. It would never happen. You would be really uncomfortable. You'd probably have to see a chiropractor or go get a massage or something like that, but you would never pass out because that is not a type of hold that puts somebody out. It's not something that cuts off your consciousness. The same thing if you watch the hold that Daniel Penny had Jordan Neely in, that was not a choke hold. That was a restraint hold. If you wanted to choke him, you would want to put this, crest of your bicep right on the front throat area, wrap around, and then cut it off. That's what you would want to do. You would want to cut off both carotid arteries while applying pressure to the back of the head, and then he would have been unconscious within a few seconds. And if he had choked him out, it would have been better for everybody. Jordan Neely would probably still be alive. Because the odds are that Jordan Neely, which again, Jordan Neely didn't even die on the scene, he died later. Okay? So again, if you understand jiu-jitsu, you'll get an understanding of breaks and chokes and holds and different things like that. But let's go to some more big takeaways here, just a couple left. Andre Zachary, Jordan Neely's father, is not only a horrible father, but apparently a horrible person. Because Andre Zachary basically was not a part of Jordan Neely's life. Okay? Jordan Neely grew up like, unfortunately, a lot of young black children where they don't have a father. They don't have a father figure. Their father figures are, gangbangers or rappers or something like that. And so this guy's nowhere to be found. But then his son dies and he thinks, cha-ching, I can cash in on this. Because the family members of George Floyd and other people that have died in those types of circumstances or something like that, they've made tons of money off the fact that their kid is no longer here. And so this guy wanted nothing to do with his son, obviously did nothing to raise him, did nothing to make sure that he was an upstanding citizen, but now he wants to cash in off of his death. But the last quick hitter or the last big takeaway on this is, although Penny was rightfully exonerated here, and I'm so thankful to God for that, this case will still cause people to hesitate to do the right thing and to intercede when someone is being attacked. Because you're going to be thinking, crap, do I live in a state? Am I going to get a jury that's going to be able to help me out here? Because, this person's being violated and being assaulted and, I could intercede, but what if they get hurt or what if they fall down and die? What if I restrain them? And what if I do something wrong? And then they're just not going to act. Again, I go back to this case I think about all the time. I think it was in Philadelphia. There was someone raping a woman. There was a man raping a woman on a train car and nobody tried to stop him physically. But when the police showed up, a bunch of people came up to the police with their phones because they had recorded the incident. And so they're like, hey, you want the video? I'm sure the police had to have been like, wait a minute, you were in the train car? And you didn't try to stop it? I mean, some of those people they're just cowardly in their disposition. They would have never tried to stop it anyway. But maybe some of those people are thinking to themselves, and this again was before the Penny case, but maybe they're just thinking to themselves, man, what if I hurt this person? Like, what if they sue me? What if I end up killing this guy? And then so they just let the rape continue to happen. So ultimately, I think it's a net positive. This case is for Daniel Penny because he was able to protect those people that day and he still has his freedom, but perhaps a net negative for society. And that'll do it for today, guys. Quick resilience boost. Before I let you go, at Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So obviously, we've got a link to our donation page. We do still have the applications for Dominion open, so you guys can join the wait list. And again, the Origin Undaunted.Life collaboration hoodie, you have until Sunday to put in your pre-order. You have until Sunday to put in your order. And then also, I've got all the links for the stuff that we talked about on this entire episode. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.